I said, man, I loved seeing that. How, how could I get to be that good? And he said, without batting an eye, he said, well, it's the 30-12 rule.
Leadership is everywhere. In our work, in our family, in our community. We see leaders by their actions. We know their legacy. This podcast is about leaders, people just like you, doing amazing things every day. I hope these stories inspire you, they motivate you, and they fuel your leadership legacy. My name is Vicki Guy. Welcome to Ignite. Hi, and welcome to Ignite. Research by the Stanford School of Business reveals that messages delivered as stories can be up to 22 times more memorable than just facts. That study shows how people are more willing to adopt a message if an emotional response is triggered. Regarded as a motivational humorist, Lou Heckler recognizes the power of stories and their influence in leading change. He combines a wide range of stories with his speeches so that he can strike a chord with his audience. Listeners claim that his speeches impacted their mindsets about life and about themselves. Stay tuned after this break to hear more from the Hall of Fame professional speaker, Lou Heckler.
My name is Dana Morrison. I'm the IT director at Grace Christian School in Raleigh, North Carolina. IT directors often hoard so much knowledge that it's hard for their team members to learn. IT Pro TV has given us the ability to level up our technicians to a point where they can decide this is important for me to learn. I would recommend IT Pro TV to any IT team. It's just a great tool for any IT professional.
Welcome back to Ignite. Today we're here with Lou Heckler, professional speaker and speaker coach. Lou, welcome to Ignite.
Hey, Vicki, thanks. Delighted to be with you.
Thank you so much. Now, I know you've been in the speaking business for about, I think you said 40 years.
Yeah, just about.
Did you always want to be a speaker?
You know, in a way, I think I probably did, although when I was a kid, I didn't know there was such a thing as a profession. But I was the kid that always went, teacher, I'd like to do my book report first. Or they'd come in and say, now, we're going to have a school assembly. Does anybody want to narrate that? I'd be like, yeah, I'd like to do that. And I can't, I go back and I really think about what my motivations were. And I don't think it was, I mean, I know there was an element of, look at me, there always is. But I really think it just felt like my right place. It just felt like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be, is up front.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it just felt like the right thing. And tell us a little bit about people that are listening or watching that don't know what it means to be a speaker. Tell us a little bit about what that is, what you do, and what your days look like as a professional speaker.
Okay. Well, there probably are more than three categories, but I'll start with three categories of professional speakers. The first category is the celebrity, somebody who has made a name in something else. And therefore, his or her cachet is real important sometimes for people to see that individual up on the stage. The second type of speaker is an industry specialist. They know everything about car dealerships, heating and air conditioning, healthcare, whatever it might be. They have a narrow lane in which they speak, but they've become an authority on that, so they're very much in demand. Then there are people like me. I'm a subject specialist. I have always been fascinated by people who perform at remarkably high levels. People, whether they're in athletics, whether they're in drama, whether they're in business. And so I decided I would catalog what those people had done and try to figure out if there was not a formula, but if there were some tips and techniques that everyday folks could practice so that they could be great at whatever they did, whether they ran IBM or whether they ran a local laundromat. It didn't matter. There were principles that people could follow that would help them to be more successful.
You know, it's so interesting. The reason we invited you to be on Ignite, obviously, is because we like to talk to people that have done amazing things with their career and have become leaders in their space. And what you just described, you studying people doing great things, we're talking to you about how you've done the same thing with your career. So tell me a little bit about how you made this what it is today, becoming a professional speaker, being able to inspire, I'm sure, audiences all over the place. How did that happen for you?
Well, it's crazy because, again, it's not something you grow up thinking you'll do. And now I've been in spoken in 47 of the 50 US states and about a dozen foreign countries. So what I did was I just kind of thought back. First of all, I started out, Vicky, in television. I was on television from the time I was 19 years old at the University of North Carolina. And because I came along in the 60s and 70s and 80s in television, an enormous amount of it was live. That was great experience, just being up live in front of a camera. Now that you're up live in front of an audience, it doesn't seem very daunting. The second thing is I did a lot of interview talk shows, what you're doing today. And I got to talk to an awful lot of people who were at the top of their field. And what fascinated me was it didn't matter if they worked for a big profit making company or a small nonprofit making organization, they all did the same kinds of things. And I thought, maybe I could use my journalism skills, because that's what my undergraduate degree is in. Maybe I could just start a catalog, if you will, of what these people had done. And I could put it into a colorful format of some kind, because having been on television for many years, I know you got to keep them watching. Mm-hmm. So that and humor and stories, and you just kind of put it all together. And you also, I joined something called the National Speakers Association more than 30 years ago. And we have annual conventions where we entertain each other at the convention. And so I've gotten to see world-class speakers from every continent deliver at these programs. And not that you're there to, quote unquote, steal their material or anything like that, but when you see people doing things in a beautiful way and you think, wow, there must be some way I could adopt or adapt some piece of that. So really my master's degree has been being a member of the National Speakers Association and learning by watching other people who are great.
Yeah, and I always find that experience is one of the best educations that you can possibly get. I mean, it's great to have a formal education, but experience, sure, you just can't beat that. And you mentioned about being in radio TV and doing live shows, which, yes, today we can edit things. We can, splice, right, edit, however we want to make it look. We can probably make it look on camera and on video. But having that experience of live shows, I'm sure, has set you up for success. And one of the things that you mentioned was telling stories. Yeah. So were you able to tell stories then and then kind of have them evolve over time? Or how do stories fit in to what you're doing?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think I went to school at the University of North Carolina. I mentioned that. In the Carolinas, there's a great storytelling tradition. And when I would go home with roommates or friends over the weekend, we would sit down with somebody's grandpa or somebody's dad or somebody's mom, and they would just tell these stories, and I would be just like, oh my gosh. And I started thinking back to when I was 12 years old. There used to be a man named Peter Lind Hayes. Peter Lind Hayes was a professional storyteller, and he would appear on what were then variety shows on TV. And my dad invited me to go to a program with him when I was 12 years old. And he said, Peter Lind Hayes is going to tell stories. And I think I would probably thought, well, I like being with my dad, but I don't know how this will be. He came out on stage. There was a single microphone in front of a black drape. And he talked for an hour and 45 minutes, and everybody was mesmerized. And I think that sowed the seed for me. Nowadays, here's what we know. You said people learn by experience better than reading a book, reading a manual, and that sort of thing. And I certainly agree with that. But they also learn by hearing a story of success. Here's how somebody did something that I observed that made them a star. So I tell that story, and the key to telling a story is it's something I've seen, and instead of just retelling the story, I kind of relive the story. I basically reenact the story. I play all the characters so that it feels like the person is there, because I want two things to happen when I tell a story. First thing I want them to say is, yeah, that makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. And the second thing, I think if we do a really good job of storytelling, is people go, wait a minute. My dad used to say that. Mm-hmm. My scoutmaster, my fifth grade English teacher used to tell us, and you start to sort of recall this lore that has fed your life that you never thought about harvesting, but you can, because it teaches you how things really get done. I also think about when one of the first jobs I had as a news reporter for a CBS station in Charlotte, North Carolina. And my boss sat down and gave me a little list that had Here are your duties. And I went back in the newsroom and I was looking at that. And one of the fellows who'd been there for a long time came over and he said, "Put that down. Let me tell you how it really works here."
Yeah.
And then he told stories. And that was really the best training I had. So I thought, as a speaker, if I could hone my skills as a storyteller, I could probably do pretty well. And actually, that's mostly what I'm known for, are my stories.
Yeah, stories are so powerful in just both our personal lives as well as our professional lives. And I know you spend a lot of time coaching other people in how they can bring their story to life and tell their stories to inspire others. I can remember a time when I have been in an audience and I have had that experience where I've just hung on every single word that
Sure.
the person has said, which is really powerful. But one of the things I also know is that not everybody is a good storyteller. And
True.
it's also really critical in being a leader. And,
Yes.
obviously in your line of work, stories play a huge role. But with people that are leading teams or leading organizations, how do you think stories and being able to tell a good story can have an
Mhm.
impact on their leadership abilities?
Well, let's make a transfer from what I do in a speech to what people could do as leaders.
Mm-hmm.
The most simplistic version of a good speech is make a point, tell a story. Make a point, tell a story. Make a point, tell a story. It's not quite that simple, but that's sort of the basics of the outline. So think about this. If you are a leader right now and you are training someone on your staff, somebody maybe just new, or maybe they've been there a long time and now you need them to develop a skill in a fresh area. Make a point, tell a story. Here's why we think this is important. Here's how I've seen it work in other organizations. Here's where we got this idea. So it's kind of like I'll just take from a man's perspective. I don't walk into a department store when I need a new suit, look up on the rack and say, yeah, okay, right there, that's the size I wear. I'll take that, wrap it up, and I'll take it home. Do I?
Mm-hmm.
What do I do? Try it on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what a story does for people. It gives them a chance to hear what somebody's saying. It's like, oh, yeah, I think that fits me. I think you
Right.
need to take in a little bit here, whatever. In other words, it's a way of projecting yourself into the story if the story is well told. And so the great stories, I think, are the ones that make people say, what would I do in that situation?
Mm-hmm.
What would I do? Oh, he did X. I wonder if I would have done Y. And it gives you a chance to kind of test it out before you actually have to go and execute it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a great technique for training people and really for inspiring people so that they see that you're talking about something practical. Today we don't need theory. We need doable, I can do this tomorrow kinds of stuff. And so whether you're a leader, a speaker, whatever you are, a mom, a dad, a grandparent, it's important to be able to have those skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that storytelling, the way you just described it, really is all about how you can connect with somebody, right? So how you can make them feel part of that experience and then get them thinking about how does it apply to me? What can I do in that situation? And I think that's a
Yeah, and I think some of it is the language you use as you tell the story.
mm,
I use a lot of little parenthetical expressions when I'm up on stage, like, I bet I'm not the only one who, or have you ever had a situation where or doesn't it make you kind of crazy when you see somebody,
mm.
and
You're
it,
giving away
it,
some of your secrets, Lou.
yeah, yes. It invites people to feel like they are a part of the message when you're a speaker. But when you're a leader in a staff, it invites them to feel like they're part of the organization, that they matter in the organization, that they're not just a name on some chart or a listing of those 4 or 5 things that they do.
Yeah, and we know that obviously if somebody feels part of something, they're going to be more engaged in their work and more happy in those engagements as well. So,
People want to matter.
absolutely. Yeah, who
Yeah,
doesn't, right? Right.
right.
Can you think of a time when you didn't want to matter? Now I'm using your technique. See that, Lou?
Yeah. the It would take me too long to tell this story, but
Yeah.
there was an instance where I was in the military. I served 2.5 years in the United States Army, and I was a trainer. I was a speech teacher. Nothing has changed. I was a speech teacher in the Army, and I was an enlisted man, and I had but I did have a class of officers, And without going into the dynamics of what that means, it just means they all outranked me, and yet I was their teacher. I had a fellow who did a terrible job on his one speech, and so I gave him a failing grade. And when I went back to the office and my boss heard that, he said, "No, you can't do that. An enlisted man can't fail an officer." And I said, "Well, he did a terrible job." He said, "We're going to have to pass him anyhow."
Mm,
Fortunately, it was toward the end of my time in the military, and I felt a little discouraged for a
yeah.
while.
Yeah.
But overall, my time in the military was great, and I'm happy and proud to have served.
Yeah. Well, speaking of coaching, you spend a lot of time coaching other people on not just storytelling, but also on how to be a speaker in their own space, whether it's in that
Right.
content or specialization of a topic area. What are some of the things that, are there some things that come to mind that in your experiences as a coach,
Mhm.
um, you've been able to use some of the things that you've learned throughout your career to help inspire
Sure.
others or get others to kind of overcome some of their fears in speaking? Because I know a lot of people especially in the corporate world, they may not be professional speakers, but they're doing a
But
lot
they
of
have to speak.
speaking.
Yeah.
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 So what are
Yeah.
those things that you share with people or that come to mind that you share that helps them overcome kind of that hurdle of public speaking?
Okay, let me just cover three quick things. The
Okay.
first is structure. A good speech has structure to it. It has a beginning and a middle and an end. And if possible, it kind of comes around the circle and comes back. The end kind of comes back to where you were at the beginning. So, structure is the kind of thing that helps people understand. I'm going to talk today about these three things. It kind of helps them learn how to listen. The second thing is to um, be flexible in the kinds of examples that you use. Look at the people to whom you're speaking and say, what would make a difference to them? What would matter to them? Before I speak at a bank association, a car dealers association, a real estate company, I talk to a bunch of their people and try to find out what are some of the things that make them laugh, make them cry, what keeps them up at night, what are they trying to do with their organization. That way I'm never trying to pretend that I'm Mr. Inside, but it kind of helps me not be Mr. Outside either. So get to know that organization. And the third thing is just, this is easier said than done, just love what you're doing. Just be in the moment at that moment and be as completely present and as completely you as you possibly can. Because here's the deal. All people want to do is they want to get behind your eyes and look out here and say, well, how does he see this? How does she see this? How could I learn something from that? And if you can put all of that together in a theme that runs through the entire presentation, I think the one thing that we forget sometimes is that people don't listen to speeches for the topic because there are dozens of speakers that speak on that topic. They listen for the speaker because of the voice of that person, not la la la, not that voice, but how they sound, how they say things, how they tell stories, how they get their points across. Picture it like this. If you like, let's say, John Grisham, big best-selling author, and you happen to hear that he has a new book out, and you go into a bookstore, my guess is you don't know the name of the book, do you? Probably not. What do you say? Do you have the latest John Grisham? When you're really good at what you do, people consider you then that brand. You're like the John Grisham of speaking, leading, whatever it is that you do, because you've established in their minds, this guy, this gal is an authority, and I want to hear what he or she has to say.
You bring up a really interesting point in that most of our markets, no matter what industry we're in or what profession we're in, they're crowded. We have crowded markets.
Yeah.
There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of people doing a lot of the same things that we all do.
Yes.
And there's got to be a way to separate ourselves. Have you found a way to separate yourself as a speaker to the others in the market?
Yeah, I think it's the storytelling, as I mentioned. It's my humor. From the time I was a kid, I have had a knack for humor. I just see things humorous. The great, great television pioneer, Steve Allen, the original host of The Tonight Show, was one of my greatest inspirations. Funny, smart, silly. People like that. They like that. So I think, that was probably it's my humor, my storytelling. And the third thing, this is funny. This is almost one of those duh answers. I'm really easy to work with. I don't demand first class tickets. I don't demand a limousine come pick me up. I don't say put what is it, M&Ms in my dressing room and take out the green ones or whatever. Because in the long run, people want to hear you, but they also want to work with you. And
Mhm.
if you want to get recommendations to other people, I want them to say, "Boy, he did a neat job as a speaker, and what a nice
Mm.
guy. He was easy to work with." I mean, how hard is that?
Yeah.
But you hear stories
Yeah.
that sometimes people get a little bit too much of a prima donna in the way they act, and that gets you one speech.
Hmm. Yeah. And
One of my
I think our mutual friend Shep Hyken, who's also been on Ignite, he would love
Yes,
to have heard the fact that that's one of your competitive advantages is just being easy to work with, on top
yeah,
of, being good, right? That's a
yeah.
differentiator for sure.
Well, one of my great mentors, a fellow named Ty Boyd, one of the
Mhm.
founders of the National Speakers Association. I asked him when I was starting out, to give me a word of wisdom, and he said, "Whether you do a good job or a bad job, you will get recommendations. You just don't want the recommendations from when you've done the bad job."
That's right. That's
It's like
right.
they'll say, "Well, I'll tell you who you don't want."
Yeah. Yeah.
You want them to say, "Oh, I'll tell you who you do want."
Hmm. Yeah. You talked about humor and that being a big part of what you do and how you infuse that in the stories that you tell.
Yeah.
Where does it play a role in leadership within, let's say, a corporation?
Mhm.
People sometimes are afraid to be funny in
Yes.
in in being in leading others or in leading a team.
Mhm.
Where do you find humor exists or is best suited in a corporate setting to help illustrate a story or
Yeah.
motivate somebody? Where would you find that?
Well, Vicky, I think the first thing is that you don't want to think of humor as being a joke.
Mm.
Okay, it's not a joke. I mean, that's what comedians do. Okay, that's not us. That's not a speaker. That's not a leader. So what you just want to do is to see the inconsistencies, the irrationalities, just the little giggles and chuckles that we have in everyday life. I look for them. I look for signs, for instance, that say funny things, that they don't realize they're saying funny things. I actually passed in Southern Illinois one time. I passed one of these little strip shopping centers, and it had a convenience store and a chicken place, and it had a tattoo parlor. And on the window of the tattoo parlor, it said, "All work done while you wait." Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, probably. I mean, maybe they did that to be funny. I don't know, but it just struck me as funny.
Yeah.
So I think what a leader does, a leader is able to separate what's important from what's urgent.
Mm.
And if it's urgent, it's pretty good to be serious and get it done, ram it through, sell it, ship it, whatever you're trying to do. If it is important, but it doesn't have quite that same urgency to it, have some fun with it. I mean, just create an atmosphere where I want to create an atmosphere. When I was a manager of people, I once had 17 people working for me. I wanted people to say, "I can't wait to get in there today. I can't wait to see what happens
Yeah.
because, we're going to make something happen. We're going to have some fun." And it doesn't, I think there's also a big difference between making fun of and having fun with.
Mm, sure.
So there's no place in any workplace today of making fun of people because of their size, gender, anything.
Hmm.
But just have some fun.
Yeah.
Be willing to poke them in the ribs a little bit and have some fun. And I think people appreciate that. I think they especially appreciate it when the top guy or gal is able to do that.
Yeah. Especially when they poke fun at themselves, right?
Oh, no
Yeah.
question. I mean,
Absolutely.
because we are funny people. I mean, we are. I used to say to people when I would speaking in a fairly formal atmosphere, and I'd have on a tie, and I would say to people, "Would you like? Do you ever think of yourself as being logical?" "Oh, I do. For instance, I knew today I'd be speaking for 4 or 5 hours, so I took a piece of cloth and I tied it in a knot around my neck. Doesn't that make sense? In
Right.
fact, let me just tighten it right now." It's just because it's just silly stuff that we do.
Yeah.
And if it gets explained that way, people go, "That's right. That is sort of dumb that you'd wear a tie while you have to speak all day."
I can't help but think about the show Seinfeld because that is, I think, of the perfect epitome of telling stories about things that happen every single day and making them just funny, right?
Observational humor, it's called. That's
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, how many things have you laughed at over the years on Seinfeld and gone, "That's right. That's crazy."
Yeah.
And I've done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoopi Goldberg said in an interview one time, "I think the best humor is simply that in which we see ourselves."
Mm-hmm. I know I laugh at myself just about every day about something. so, so Lou,
That's
you
healthy.
good, yeah, good, because it happens a lot. So, Over your career, you've had a lot of great experiences. I'm sure you've impacted thousands of lives with your storytelling and your coaching, and the talks that you've given. And I'm wondering, before we wrap up today, what are 2 or 3 or even just one kind of pearls of wisdom that you could share with people that are listening that either want to separate themselves in their marketplace, or they want to be better at speaking in general, whether it be public speaking or professional speaking or just giving their presentation? Is there 1 or 2 things that you would say, hang on to this stuff because it's really made me a leader in my space?
I think of this young man named Matt Cohn. In the community where I live, there is a swimming pool. It's a club. It's not a la-di-da club. It's just a nice social club.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a nice swimming pool there. And I used to watch Matt swim, coach swimming like crazy. But I never actually saw him swim. I knew he had been a college level, very high level performer. He has one of those long bodies like Michael Phelps has.
Mm-hmm.
So Matt got in the pool by himself one day when I was there, and he went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was like watching a dolphin. And when he got out of the pool, I said, Matt, I loved seeing that. How could I get to be that good? And he said, without batting an eye, he said, well, it's the 30-12 rule.
What's that?
That's what I said. What's that? I said, I know about the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of your business from 20% of your clients or whatever. I said, what's the 30-12 rule? He said, I practiced 30 hours a week for 12 years.
Wow.
I don't know if that's the secret to being great, but I think it is. I mean, I think it's just every day, consistent, high-level performance, practicing, always trying to be better, watching people who are doing a great job. When you watch somebody who does a great job, singer, dancer, ice skater, speaker, I don't care who it is, baseball player, look at that and enjoy it, but then analyze it and say, well, what did he or she just do that separated them?
Yeah.
And then say, is there some way I could incorporate some aspect of that in what I do so that I could be, I don't want to skate like she did or hit a baseball like he did or kick a football like somebody did, but I want to take it into my realm and say, how can I be the all-star on my team? Because there are things that they're doing that we can replicate.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Great advice, Lou. Thank you so much. We're going to take a short break, and after the break, we're going to be right back with a bit more from Ignite.
I'm James Packer. I'm the General Manager of Kirk ISS based in the Cayman Islands. I used IT Pro TV extensively in my last place. It grew very well, helped upskill the team. I had 110 engineers in the field and we had dozens of IT Pro accounts with the guys training, and last year alone they passed over 40 certs by using the online training. I think I can safely say without IT Pro TV I wouldn't be where I was today, because I only got this job on the back of the qualifications I have.
Welcome back to Ignite. In this episode, Lou discussed how his own experience is the best learning tool for his audiences. Honing in on storytelling skills is what established him as a renowned speaker, and he is able to connect with others, whether it is just one individual or hundreds. His humorous yet inspiring words continue to resonate with people. To hear more from influential people like Lou Heckler, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. From IT Pro TV and myself, thank you, and we'll see you next time.